Hello, everyone. Once again, we come to the United Nations International Day of Peace 2020. And unfortunately, as we look around the globe, we find the world is not a very peaceful place right now, is it? It's not just that in some countries there's all-out war with bombings and shooting, like in Syria, but in so many countries there's violence of some sort or another. There's ethnic tensions, there are border disputes and crossfire. There's discrimination against people of colour, against different ethnic and religious groups, against gays and GLBT. There's terrorism, school shootings, domestic violence. It's a grim world, to be honest. And on top of that, there's violence against nature and the animal kingdom. We're in the midst of the sixth great extinction, damaging ecosystems in some places almost beyond repair. Right now, we're fighting a pandemic, and tragically, to some extent, we've brought this upon ourselves by our absolute disrespect of the natural world and our disrespect of animals. And as we destroy an environment, we force animals into closer contact with humans. We are moving into the animals' environment and shooting them, hunting them, eating them, selling them, trafficking them to sell in the wildlife markets in Asia, in the bushmeat markets in Africa, selling them in the mostly illegal international trade in exotic pets. And in all of these situations, and in our intensive animal farms, factory farms so-called, where billions of animals are being bred in horrific conditions for us to eat, in all of these situations, it's made more possible for a pathogen to jump from an animal to a person. Sometimes this will result in a new disease. COVID-19 was from a virus that jumped from an animal to a human. And unfortunately, this new disease, COVID-19, has been extremely contagious, raced around the world. And it has caused so much suffering, so much loss of life, loss of jobs. It's caused economic chaos. It's affected people everywhere, all around the globe. And of course we shall come out of it. We always do. But as we come out of it, we must get together as a global family to fight a far worse threat to our future, to the future of life on Earth as we know it, and that's climate change. Climate change is for real. Just look at what's happening now. Look at the terrible fires in California and other United States. Look at the fires that ravaged Australia last year. Look at the places that have been destroyed by terrible hurricanes. The bad ones are getting more frequent. Look at the places that have been harmed by floods, the places where there have been terrible droughts, unbelievable heat waves. This is all happening, and again, it's due to our disrespect of the natural world. This planet has finite natural resources. It was Mahatma Gandhi who said, the planet can provide for human need, but not human greed. And we have been plundering these natural resources relentlessly for years and years and years. And in some places to such an extent that we're using them up faster than Mother Nature can replenish them as our human populations grow, as people rise up out of poverty, which of course we want them to do, but then they try to emulate the unsustainable lifestyles of those in the affluent societies. What's going to happen? I don't know. I worry about what's going to happen. But in spite of all this, in spite of the politicians and big businesses who get together to push for unlimited economic global development on this planet with finite natural resources, thinking only of short-time gain and not the long-term health of the planet and future generations. So, on this International Peace Day, do we give in to despair? No, we do not. I have with me a bell. Now, this doesn't look a very smart bell, but it rings, and it is made from metal that comes from one of these terrible landmines that have maimed so many people around the world. And it was detected by one of these so-called hero rats, the giant forest rats that sniff out the landmines under the ground and save countless lives. Dogs do it too, of course. So I'm going to ring this bell, and as I ring this bell, I'm going to make a commitment. I hope all of you will make a commitment too, and that is that each one of us does our bit. So what can we do? We can educate ourselves. We can learn about people from different cultures and ethnic groups. And this is really, really important, because what's happening now is that different religious groups tend to be discriminated against, vilified, made out to be evil. And, you know, when I grew up in World War II, in England, of course, we hated the Germans. People were being killed and bombed, and everybody was frightened. But it was the Nazis. And how wise of my mother, about 5 years after the war, she let me go off to live with a German family who wanted someone to help the children learn English, because she wanted me to understand that just because of Hitler and his Nazi party, that didn't mean that all Germans were bad people. So while I was in Germany, I learned a lot. I learned that ordinary Germans are the same as everybody else, good ones and bad ones. I learned that Hitler had triggered this Nazi party, which was perpetrating unspeakable horrors on the Jews and the Gypsies and the disabled people in the concentration camps. But there were Germans who hated it as much as we did. Germans who were incredibly brave, standing up and fighting against this regime, often losing their lives as a result. So we need to make ourselves aware exactly who are these other people who seem so different but are actually the same. All the major religions, and there's so much hatred now between Muslims and Christians and Jews and so on, but all the major religions have the same golden rule: do to others as you would have them do to you. Let's try and take that to heart as we move into this next year. Let's try and reach out to people who are being discriminated against. This is what our Roots and Shoots program does. We try to break down barriers between people of different nations, different cultures, different religions, people of different ages. And we understand that far more important than the color of skin or culture or religion is the fact we are one human family. That's what I want us to remember on this UN International Peace Day. And make a vow to fling yourself into what you care about, whether it's reducing or eliminating plastic, whether it's working to reduce the trafficking of animals, whether it's trying to clean up the ocean, whether it's protecting forests. Everybody can plant a tree, and when we plant enough trees, as we learn from the Trillion Tree Challenge, then we can absorb the carbon dioxide that is causing climate change. It's not just emissions from fossil fuel. It's also the fact that we're destroying the forests, cutting down the trees. I want to end with a story that I think is very symbolic. This was the first little Roots and Shoots group in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. And they decided for their first project, they wanted to go and reforest a hill that at one time had been sacred, but now nearly all the trees had gone. It was a rather large project, but that's what they wanted to do. So their mentor, Dario Merlo, he went to get permission from the commanding officer of the militia that was in power at that time, because this is an area filled with mineral riches, so there's a lot of fighting that goes on. The man said, well, it seems a ridiculous project, but I suppose there's no harm in it, but we'll have to send soldiers with you. So now imagine, here's this little group, Dario and about 15 children aged 8 to 12, something like that, and he'd got little seedlings for them from the forestry division, and it was very hot. And as they tramped this long distance, with them were 4 big Congolese soldiers with AK-47 rifles over their shoulders. And they get to the hill, and I think the children realize this is really probably not possible, but they're going to plant their trees. But the ground is hard, and one little girl soon starts to cry because she can't make the hole. It's too hard. And after a short time, one of the 4 soldiers lays his gun against a tree and goes to help her. And within the next 10 minutes, all the soldiers had put their guns down and were helping the children plant trees. It's symbolic because this is what we must do to fight climate change. We must lay aside our political differences. We must lay aside our ethnic and religious differences. We must come together as one human family to tackle climate change and save the planet for the future before it's too late.